reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. Welcome to Totally Lit, the podcast celebrating reading, writing and creating literature. This episode, I have the hybrid author herself, Joanne Morrell, an author and podcaster based in Perth, Western Australia. Joanne writes children's and young adult fiction, as well as independently publishing women's fiction and short nonfiction books for authors in her Author Lining series. She loves story in all mediums, film, television, and of course books. Jo is the social media coordinator and newsletter editor for Squibby West, as well as founding her own local book club. She is the host and creator of the Hybrid Author podcast, producing weekly episodes, interviewing industry professionals on all aspects which make up a hybrid author career. I hope you enjoy our chat. Joanne Morrell, the hybrid author, is with me today. I'm so excited to chat to you, Jo.
I'm so excited to be here, Kai. Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, can you tell me what is a hybrid author?
Right. Well, yes. Hybrid author. I started the hybrid author because I was actually just looking to put everything I do in writing and authorship together under one kind of umbrella. So I write nonfiction books, women's fiction, children's fiction, and I found, and none of these I set out in the beginning to do. It was always kind of children's fiction that I was interested in. And as I have chased that kind of dream, there's been other ideas that have come to me that I've pursued, like the nonfiction books. And when I put these books out, self-published these books, but I look for a traditional deal for my children's fiction, I went to, when I was starting to promote and market them, I became very overwhelmed very quickly about having two social media sites for effectively two different brands, thinking about websites and things like that. And I just thought, I'm a mom of two kids. I think I was working part-time at the time. And I just was time poor. How was I could hardly do one kind of author brand. How was I going to effectively do two? And so, yeah, I had to think about my work in total as a whole and what could tie it all together. So when I first started the hybrid author, and that was 3 years ago, it was really about the way that I published those publishing endeavors. So as I've just said, I seek traditional representation for my children's fiction and I self-publish my nonfiction. So to me, that was sort of a hybrid author. It's kind of doing, the way that I spin it is, it's not one way of doing things. It's doing lots of different things. But since starting it, I have the Hybrid Author podcast, and from talking to other guests, it's not one way of doing things. So not one genre, not writing in one genre, not publishing one way, just all different ways. Not one way of doing things, really.
Well, the business of being an author is such a mammoth task. It's one thing I didn't really feel prepared for after I'd got my first book published, doing all of the marketing afterwards and really knowing what to do in knowing, okay, should I just approach bookshops? Should I be approaching libraries? Should I be approaching schools? Do I do all this myself or do I get someone to do it for me? And yeah, the activity around marketing your book can be such a big job. It's pretty talented if you're also marketing your own self-published stuff as well. How did you go about learning the process?
By podcasting, listening to podcasts is really where I started, and exactly what you were saying, though. I become overwhelmed by all the aspirations and the things I try and do, but all the things that make up the author business. It feels like a lot at times. But yeah, started out listening to podcasts. The Creative Pen podcast is a fantastic resource for self-publishing and was actually the inspiration for me to want to start my own podcast. So shout out Joanna Penn. She's an unbeknown mentor of mine, and I've had her on my podcast a couple of times, and she's prolific in what she does. And also the Alliance of Independent Authors. These are all UK-based sort of authors and organisations and things, and they're fantastic. But it's a global community. So I attended a self-publishing conference online last year, and that was the first time I'd actually attended something like that. And it was an amazing community of authors across the world just sharing their tips and expertise on self-publishing, and from all things like, especially marketing and going after doing it yourself basically, and tips and tricks and things like that. And the lady that I recently interviewed is called Anna Featherstone. Have you heard of her?
Yes.
I think she's on the East Coast, and she's fantastic, and she's got such good resources as well. So all these individuals kind of paving the way and doing it is how I effectively got the bug to do it and try it, and the inspiration off the bat. And yeah, but there's so many different avenues to doing it now. It's another whole overwhelm of how what's the best publishing avenue for your book if you're going to do it yourself, because there's so many different options. So I think it just depends on you and your personality. For me, I like to have the control, I guess. So I chose the cover designer, chose the editor, actually work with freelancers, like a bit of a team, but went through Ingram Spark to publish and to actually get the print books. And I think they sort of upload to all the other platforms and also Amazon as well. That's the way I done it, whereas other people can go through what is hybrid publishing, like these one-stop shops that will do the editing for you, make the book for you, all that sort of stuff. There's just so much out there.
And the books that you've self-published are about writing, is that right? That they're books that you can access to learn about the craft?
Yeah, well, it's different kind of topics. So the nonfiction books that I've got out are under my author linings series. So I call that author linings is sort of silver linings for authors. And there's 2 books in the series at the moment, and I have aspirations to bring out a couple more this year. But the 2 that's out there, they come from lived experience. So like I said before, I didn't plan on writing nonfiction books, but when I finished my writing degree and I set up shop as a freelance writer, thinking I'll just do the freelance writing on the side while I effectively work on the book business, and I'll make money that way. But what I didn't realize, and again, time poor individual here, was I was trying to run 2 businesses, not just one. So the freelance writing business that I set up, I just learned so much from doing that. And you could actually transfer the tips that are in this book to an author business, because it's really the same sort of setup. But yeah, the first book is Freelance Writing, Quick Tips for Fast Success. And it's a very short, these books are what I call short nonfiction, because seriously, it's like 7,000 words. It's tiny. You can read it in an hour, short, sweet and simple. And they are like 60 plus quick tips about mindset, business values, rates of pay, freelance writing work, and things like that you can just flip ahead. So that's that one. The other one is more on the emotional aspects of authorship. So that one's called Author Fears and How to Overcome Them. And that's
we all need that one.
Yeah. Well, that book, and I had it, I think it was through Writer's Digest. I can't remember what I put it in for, but it was reviewed by them. And it was so funny. Like, the reviews that came back were very good, but someone had just said, it's a book full of the author's insecurities. And I was like, I mean, it absolutely is though. But these are the things that have come up for me in pursuing this writing career and this authorship career, and how I've kind of coped getting through them. And I offer up little outcomes as suggestions for anybody kind of going through the things that I've gone through, because if you've never done this before, you're never subjected to it. Like when I first wrote my first book, it was my first year of university, and I self-published it. It was what I called a middle grade, but I knew nothing, and I had a artwork commissioned, and it was a good product, but I never had it professionally edited. And I use this as an example because as a writer, you're working hard, you're in your head, and I was pumped, and I'd organized everybody, and we'd made the product. And as soon as I put it out there, friends and family, they were so supportive, and it was really well done. But then I just got hit with the biggest self-doubt of my life. I'd never experienced anything like that before, and I could not get behind the work because I hadn't had it professionally edited. And it wasn't bad, there was just parts of it though. I remember reading over it, and something in my gut just didn't feel right. And yeah, I think I just rushed it completely. So my response when people were excited for me, like, oh, you've written a book, and I would say, yeah, it's crap, don't buy it. So that pretty much died a death from that experience. But things like that, I'd never had that experience before. So I've since had it. And I've learned, to be patient with my work. And if I read over it and something doesn't sit right in my gut, then, I write it till it does. And I always professionally edit.
Well, I think too, we have an idea in our head that creating a book is just the author's role, whereas there's actually a whole team of people that if you, even with traditional publishing, you submit your manuscript and they will come back with edits and changes, and it's not just a lonely process. Once you've got something picked up, people work with you to make it the best it can be as well.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. The self-publishing is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to do all the roles of a traditional publishing house in whichever way that you go about it, whether it is outsourcing freelancers or finding a hybrid publisher that does it all for you, Yeah, it's the same kind of process.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with if you're self-publishing or writing a manuscript that you outsource to get the help that you need from a professional, because that's what a traditional publisher does. They have hired professionals within their organization that do it for them. And that's just what you do on the outside when you're self-publishing, is you reach out to people. It just means you have to fund you're paying for the bill.
Yes, that's that's a big thing. And yeah, it can get really costly as well. I mean, you could cut corners and there's things you can do, but if you're going to do it right. That's the whole point. We're in a great age where these self-publishing platforms are getting to a point where the quality of the stuff coming out is pretty good, top notch. Someone said the other day the stuff that's getting printed is on par with some of the traditional publishing houses. And yeah, I think if you aspire to match your book as good as them, then yeah, it's definitely a good avenue. But it can get expensive, the cost up front. Have you heard of Kickstarter before?
Yes.
Yeah, this is quite a good platform, and one that I'm in the process of sort of researching and seeing if I want to go down that avenue. But it's more like a crowdfunding model, and again, people can back your project. It's if someone's going to buy the book off you anyway, it's just a way of sort of securing books, sales up front. So the money comes through immediately. So you're out, you've got that there rather than sort of forking out first, then relying on book sales for earning an income.
And even I was speaking to Isabel Carmody earlier in the year, and that was when she was first starting out. She did a crowdfunding campaign before Kickstarter or anything was around to get her writing off the ground. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out for support, because you are delivering a product in the end as well.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, it's not a new thing. I think crowdfunding's been around for a while. All these models, I think, have. It's maybe just taking off now with the way that the industry is.
And tell me now, you've also got the Hybrid Author podcast where you're interviewing industry professionals. How have you found that has helped with your marketing?
Yes, yeah, greatly. So, especially on a global scale. So, as I said, I self-published my nonfiction books through Ingram, and you can track your sales through them to see, which countries that the sales have been made from and things like that. And I feel like the podcast is sort of aiding to that. I don't think it's come through Ingram Spark.
Okay.
It might have come through the categories, but as I used the Creative Pen podcast as my example for starting to get into self-publishing and things, but through Joanna Penn's podcast, I never went on her website, but through her podcast, I have bought pretty much all her books.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, podcasts definitely sell books. You're following that author's journey, I guess, online and via the podcast and things. And I'm talking about my process all the time or the work that I'm doing. And people sort of tune in for the interviews, but they also tune in to hear what I've been doing and stuff like that. And I definitely feel that it's such a good marketing tool to be able to reach people directly, readers, and obviously writers and then like-minded people, anybody that's interested. So I definitely think podcasting it's a fantastic marketing tool, like a fast, effective one, definitely.
And do you have any advice to any writers that are listening that might be interested in starting a podcast as part of their writing career?
Yeah, absolutely. Choose a subject that it's not going to dry up pretty quickly, like one that's quite broad. There was a podcast again, I think in the UK, I think it was called the Anxious Writer or something like that. And it went for a good few years, but the podcast hosts had said themselves that they were stopping to pivot to see where they could go because they felt like they had pretty much drained the topic done it to death kind of thing. So maybe find a topic that's kind of not timely, but one that's gonna go the distance. There's so many popping up now. It's such a big,
they're everywhere.
yeah, as anything, isn't it? It's such a crowded market. So you could maybe look at what other people are doing, but look at what you could do differently as well. Yeah, and just structure it how you want it to be kind of structured as well.
I think the thing I love about podcasting, well, especially with my podcast, is I get to speak to people like I'm chatting on the phone with them, like amazing authors, and I get to hear all their tips and ideas, and it gives me access to people I wouldn't usually get to chat to, and it's made me some wonderful friendships as well. But also, I'm sitting here in my tracksuit pants, and you're over in WA sitting in your car, and it's so flexible in that you have so much control over it. In terms of like my day-to-day job, I'm sometimes trapped at my desk, and I've got meetings, and I can't do the things I want to do because of the constraints of just everybody's job. You have to do what you're told in your jobs. Whereas with my podcast, I just interview who I want and talk about what I want.
It builds confidence as well, though, doesn't it? Like I feel since I've been doing the podcasting, like I've not gone out and done a lot of in-person speaking. It's something that I've gotten more into this year. And I feel like this is my medium because I'm quite comfortable hiding behind the mic and chatting, and that's all good. But I feel like your audio reflexes are so worked that I wouldn't, one of the things that you can worry about standing up presenting and stuff is, oh, I'm not going to know what to say or anything like that. But I recently did I think it was back in March, literary festival workshop on roadblocks in writing. And, I was excited and a little bit nervous, and I just talked my box off. And I thought that has come from the podcast and, the skills, the chatting, the interview skills, all of it. It's definitely honed the way that I'm able to share and speak and provide value for people. It's also an inspiration for myself. It's actually being able to connect with like-minded people like you, and you get to ask the questions that you want. And when I listen back, when I edit, you just learn so much. And I get really inspired by my own podcast. So I guess that's why I keep doing it as well. And you get back to the writing community too. You're adding value for other people. And
it is a wonderful opportunity, especially because I started the podcast before I was published. And so before then, I didn't really have ways to give back. And then as the podcast has grown and spread, I'm like, I've got ways now to give back to the writing community in ways that I didn't have before. And now that I've got a book out as well, like you just feel your confidence grows and your knowledge grows, and then you are able to then start to do some amazing things. Like I love going to like books and homes events and bookshops and interacting with the kids and feeling like you're actually making a difference in the world, even though it's just a little tiny.
Absolutely, agree. And I think you've done it right in the sense that I keep hearing a lot of authors, they write the book and then they think about how to market it, and someone saying even if you're new, you can never start marketing yourself immediately, and I think building your own community and definitely is a good way to do it too.
Even I'm part of a program called Author Pen Pals. I don't know if you've heard of that. But I'm writing to a school in Townsville, which is where I grew up. I went to primary school up there, and just being able to connect with the kids on that extra level of, yes, I am an author, but I'm also an author from your town. I know, like, they're going to the Billabong Sanctuary, and I'm like, yes, I've been there. And just being able to have that extra connection with the kids, I'm really loving that, which I didn't expect to be a byproduct of writing. But I'm like, oh, this is great. So I just need to keep writing and keep publishing now. So.
That is. No, absolutely.
Now, tell me about your children's books.
Yeah, so from the beginning, I have set out writing children's fiction. I started with YA, young adult fiction, and I've I think slowly, I'm a member of Squibbie, so Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, Australia West. I'm the newsletter editor and the social media coordinator as well, and I've been part of that body for, I think, about 7 years. So started out there, and I do have the first manuscript I ever wrote. I think it took a long time, and it will never see the light of day. I'm not going to be sharing that with anybody. That
You're
book
going to revisit it and revamp it?
No, it was like I describe it as a verbal diarrhea or verbal vomit of my own adolescence. So apart from a few name changes, everything in the book happened like from my childhood. And I feel like I had to get that out of me as some sort of catharsis, because that genre and that, especially young adult, as a teenager, there were some of the most turbulent years of my life, but some of the best as well, best times that I've ever had. Free spirit. I was quite a wild child as well. So I feel like I've got quite a voice there. But I think I sort of took my writing seriously and did that book when I had my first child. She's now 12. So I think as my children grew and the types of stories that I was reading to them, picture books, and that soon went up to junior fiction and now kind of middle grade, I started to have ideas that brought me down in age level. So I ended up, as I said, self-publishing I said it was a middle grade, but it seemed like more like a junior fiction in my first year of uni. But that's how confused I was between those two genres. The junior fiction, it's a smaller, because I always, when I write, I never have enough. I have to always go back and flesh it out. So I didn't have enough word count, but my actual voice, my writing voice is for an older audience. So I think I got lost in the whole middle grade junior fiction for many years, and then ended up in picture books. And I'm friends with I'm part of a group they're Squibbie as well. But I'm part of like a group of like nearly 20 picture book authors. But I feel like I'm in YA. So I feel like I'm in all these different areas. But I have recently in the last year realized I have an older voice. YA is where I need to be. So I'm back writing young adult fiction. Squibbie Australia West has a Rottnest Writers Retreat. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rottnest Island.
Yes, I have. I was Googling and I was like, oh, they have a retreat at Rottnest Island. How amazing would that be to go to that?
It is amazing. So when I first started, I went to, it was like the mainland event, and everyone kept saying, oh, you going to the retreat, you going to the retreat. And I had missed out, and I said, oh no. So I went the following year, and it's like a weekend over there, and they have interstate publishers come and guest speakers, and it's such an inspiring, obviously it's a retreat and you're with everybody, and you get to pitch your work to publishers and things like that. And went for about 5 years, and then they kind of put it on hold, I guess, with COVID. There was lots of other things that was quite difficult, but now it's back this year. So I'm writing this YA and I'm going to be pitching it to, I've managed to get a critique with Samantha Ford from Allen and Unwin. She's the
Amazing. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So I handed in my 10 pages the other day. So I'm looking forward to doing that as well. So yeah, I've got a lot of backlist with the children's fiction, but I have not been able to secure a traditional publishing deal. I have submitted to lots of, not lots, but a few publishing houses for sure, but been rejected. So still going with that dream. And I feel like
process.
Oh, it absolutely is. Like, I feel like with each manuscript, I have, as I said, the first one I ever wrote, verbal vomit diarrhea of my own adolescence, that taught me self-discipline, to sit down and see I could actually finish a 50,000 page words, you know, and I've never been disciplined in my life. So I laugh that I've ended up in this profession where I need to be disciplined and I need to have patience, and I've got none of those. I do now.
That was how Totally Lit came about for me, was because I had no patience with submitting. I was like, oh, nothing's happening. And sometimes it can be like 12 months later and a little email will pop up saying, sorry. And I'm like, I'm not going to survive this process. So this gives me something to create where I've got immediate response, so that's kept me sane in the whole submitting world, really.
Come on leaps and bounds, because in the beginning I took it so personally, like against myself, and I really would self-bash quite negatively, but I obviously, it's such a passion of mine, such a calling, that I would never let it stop me. I'm very determined, very persistent, that I'm going to do this. And as much as I'm venturing into all these different other publishing avenues, I still have that goal. Because I'm friends with it. That's how I've started. I'm friends. I'm in a group with a lot of traditionally published authors. I see the work that comes out of. We're lucky we've got Fremantle Press over here, and the way that they're a community. They nurture their authors. It's just fantastic. I would just love to be sort of getting in there somehow. But the podcast again is another way of me connecting. Fremantle Press are aware of me, and I promote their authors and things like that.
I have received a rejection from Fremantle Press, so I'm very familiar with them. But they really champion Western Australian authors, so I'm trying to submit to them when I'm not a WA author. So I'm like, I forgive you, Fremantle Press.
I think they do for Western Australian, but if your book's connected somehow.
Yeah, I have a little picture book about quokkas that I'm trying to get published, which is why I know about Rottnest Island, because I'm like, that's where my book is based.
A retreat cay.
I would love to meet some quokkas in the wild. That would be amazing.
But yeah, in terms of the submitting and the rejections, as I said, was so harsh on myself throughout the process. And I did not get put through for my women's fiction was in the ASA, the Australian Society of Authors Harlequin Fiction Prize, which got drawn the other day. And I didn't get through on that. And I actually had no feelings about that whatsoever. It's just move on. You end up, you get a thick skin, is what I guess people say. And you start to realize, especially when you've been around for a long time, that it's not always you. It doesn't come back to you personally or your work. You don't have to feel attacked. It could just be that, it's just not for them. It's not what they're looking for, or they've published something else like that before, or there's all these other things that come into play.
Well, you've just got to remember it's about making money. And you are really, when you're submitting a piece of work to a publisher, you are asking them to invest in you. You're not it's not a competition where you're winning a prize. You're saying, I think this book would sell on the market. Could you please pour your money into it and print it for me?
That's it.
And so realistically, you have to look at it as, is this something that a publisher would be able to sell? Because that's the angle they're coming from. So it can be the sweetest story in the world, but if nobody wants to buy it, nobody's going to print it. So it sounds harsh, and it's a lesson I've learned. How long I've been trying this? 5 years. And I'm like, but I love my little story. I don't want to change it. But what's the point in submitting if it's not going to sell in the end, really?
That's the business, isn't it? That's the business of it. And that makes sense to me. And absolutely agree with it. I think it's hard as well with the way the publishing landscape is, I guess, especially after COVID. And I've heard picture books have taken a hit as well, in terms of not a lot of people are looking for them, I think. And there's not a lot of doors open for picture books, I think. And it got set back, didn't it? Like a lot of publishing schedules, and to try and crack in as a debut is extremely difficult at this point.
And even if you look at the way the world is at the moment, people are worrying about how to put food on their tables and keep the roof over their heads. Us asking someone to drop $25 on a book when they need to consider that for their grocery budget, it's difficult. Although I'm always like, well, let's go borrow it from the library, or let's find other ways. There's more than one way to support an author. But buying a book at the moment is a luxury for some families.
Absolutely. But that's, lucky we're blessed with such a good library system, and I utilise my libraries completely. And we're very, very lucky in Australia to get the I guess it's not, what is it, royalties? Would you call it that? The perks that we...
ELR and PLR.
Yeah, and they're also bringing in the digital ending rights that we get compensated, whereas a lot of countries don't do for their authors. So, yeah, that's another way.
Okay, so I've got a few questions for you just so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell me what was your favourite book growing up?
Yeah, oh gosh, I always feel a bit embarrassed saying this, but it's the truth, because I just feel like, you know, with books and things, you're supposed to have some sort of really good literary answer here or something. But so I was born here but brought up in Scotland, and I was absolutely obsessed with Sweet Valley High. So Francine Pascal, you know, and they actually the other day, which is hilarious because I don't know if I think Sweet Valley High came after Babysitter's Club. So these books and these stories are all getting revamped again. And I actually, my kids' Scholastic book catalogue, there was a Sweet Valley book. And I was like, goodness. Oh my gosh, why is that back? But I had bookshelves full of these books, and she really utilized. So there was Sweet Valley High, there was Sweet Valley Middle School, there was Sweet Valley Kids, there was even Sweet Valley University. I read them all. I absolutely loved those.
I don't know if she wrote them all herself or whether she had an army of ghostwriters.
I'd say she'd done it all herself. She's well into her 80s. I actually considered having her on the podcast because to me, that would be
exciting.
She's in her 80s, so I'm not sure. But they actually released a book where they were adults, which I read, and I was a little bit disappointed. But I felt like they kind of copied and pasted the descriptions. It was always the same descriptions. They always had the California sun-kissed hair, the two twins, and they had the same lockets. But I was mad for them, and that kept me reading as a child. And I was a quiet child, and yeah, that's what I was kind of known for. So
I did read those books, but I stopped because I could not handle how mean Jessica was to Elizabeth all the time.
Horrible, wasn't she? Well, the adult book, not to spoil it for anyone who's listening, because obviously Elizabeth had the long-term boyfriend Todd, and I actually even watched the television series. I think I've still got it on DVD. I'm embarrassing. In the adult one, Jessica and Todd had ended up together, and they were. Yeah, I was like, what? That didn't sit right with me.
No, I just remember one day putting the books down, and this may just be an indication of how good a writer Francine Pascal is. I was so upset at how mean Jessica was to Elizabeth. I was like, I cannot read any more of these books. I protest.
Oh, that's so funny. Jessica actually preferred her over Elizabeth.
Well, she was more interesting.
Yeah, she was that badass, wasn't she?
I was like, she's just too mean for me. I can't handle it. But yeah, after that, I took a hard turn into classic literature from there. So once I hit uni, it was all 18th century literature. So
wow, yeah. Yeah, I wish I had a more literary response for you, but that's really it.
The truth is best, I say. It makes you who you are as well. So yeah, never regret the thing you've read. So this next question, you might be able to answer it truthfully because we've already chatted about Sweet Valley High, is if you could be any book character, who would it be?
Back then, yes, it would have been Jessica. But now, thinking about it, you know, I sort of thought probably something from Alice in Wonderland, because probably the Mad Hatter, I reckon.
Definitely still an interesting choice.
Yeah. Well, I just love that saying. I think that's always associated with Alice in Wonderland, you know, because all the best people are weird or something like that. And I truly do feel that way. And who doesn't want to explore that world? Why would you not want to be a character in that land?
Yes, but you might be experimenting to get there, though.
The Jessica Wakefield in Alice in Wonderland.
Now, what are you reading right now? Have you got anything on your bedside table at the moment?
I do. I always have lots of books, and they're always, you know, half read, and they're all across the board and different things. So recently I've discovered this events that take place every month in Perth. That's where I am. And it's at this studio. It's called the Backlot Studio. It's in a place called Mount Lolly, and they do a screening of a film, but the event is called, like, it's a books to film. So I'm quite interested in adapting my work from books to screenplays or something like that. Very interested in that. So I went along to this book to film event last month. And so the book that's on my bedside table is John Wyndham's The Midwich Cuckoos. So that book, John Wyndham's an English science fiction writer from the early 1900s. I don't know if you've heard of him. I hadn't until then, but that book, The Midwich Cuckoos, was adapted to film the 1960s. It's a black and white film, The Village of the Damned. I think it's
okay.
Village of the Damned. I'd actually hadn't seen the black and white 1960s adaptation, but I had seen the American version, which was called Children of the Damned, and that was in color, and it had Christopher Reeves and Kirstie Alley, and I loved it. And it's it's about a town that just blacks out for about 24 hours, and when they wake up, all the females are pregnant and at the same time, and they have the babies, and they're all like similar looking, these white hair, and they go about being quite evil. And I think I never twigged that they're actually aliens. I don't know what I thought from that. But so yeah, I'm reading that at the moment, and then the goal is to read the script. And so after we did watch that movie, there was a couple, I forget their names, that presented and talked about obviously the differences between the book and the script and the film and things like that. So yeah, I'm interested just to see what things are taken from the book to the adaptation to the film. Yeah, in that regard. So I'm reading that. It's quite a small thing. And so far, it's pretty on par with what the movie was at this point. And yeah, other ones was, what else is there? Jojo Moyes and a really old book, Peyton Place. Have you heard of that before?
Yes.
But waiting for this book to film event that started, I went around some bookshops in town and I found this mainly books. And oh my gosh, this shop was fantastic. You just walked in, a secondhand bookshop. And this is where I got the John Wyndham book. And I found Peyton Place, and my eldest daughter's called Peyton. And anytime everybody asked me what her name was, more the older generation would say, oh, Peyton Place. And I would say, well, no, it was actually One Tree Hill that I... from, which is a YA teens, 90s growing up. I'm actually watching it again now, sadly. But yeah, so all these different sort of older books, children's fiction, women's fiction, non-fiction, it's all by the bedside.
Okay, so if you were having a dinner party, which 5 literary people would you invite to dinner?
Oh gosh, 5. That's a lot of conversation. Is it like living or dead, or
can be either living or dead?
Living, probably J.K. Rowling, fellow, I think she's Scottish, is she English? And obviously from her success, and her actual story inspires me completely about how she was in just probably the worst mindset of her life. And yeah, I would say that writing absolutely 100% saved her, escapism. So I'd love to have her around and talk about her millions. And she also writes scripts for, theatre things and stuff. So Nora Roberts as well. I've actually just read my first Nora Roberts book, and each time I go to the library, she's everywhere and she writes so prolifically, and I love her writing as well. So I'd have her. Who's the old writer who put a gun in his mouth? Was it Hemingway?
I think it was Hemingway.
Yeah, probably him.
That's something he would do.
Yeah. And is he the famous quote? Is it right drunk, edit sober?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we'd probably have a lot in common. So not obviously how he ended, but yeah, probably one of those literary people. And oh gosh, I'm not sure about the others. Who's yours?
Who would I have to dinner? I would have. Nobody's asked me this question. Agatha Christie.
Ooh. Sylvia
Plath. Who else would I have? I love a lot of historical stuff, so I'd probably get a few. I'm going to Google some people now.
Matthew Riley as well.
Yeah, he would be good.
Only because he to me is a hybrid author. He started out self-publishing, and I would be really interested to hear his story. And now obviously he's big traditionally published author. And probably one of the TV chefs who's got a book They're not, I guess they're probably ghostwriters though. So they could come and cook the delicious meal. We should all enjoy it.
I've been listening to a historical podcast that's been about 5 episodes on Byron, and I'm like, oh, I think he could be interesting to come to dinner, but it may get out of control really quickly. But he is so talented. I would love to like converse with someone that can just rattle off a poem the way he can, you know, because some of his work is like so he's just gifted. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I need to have someone like that in my presence once in my life.
Probably Holly Black as well. I just love all her stuff. Yeah, she's a little bit older with I think it's fantasy that she's in, or supernatural. Her and Maeve Binchy, who's an Irish writer. Any of the Irish writers. I love. My absolute passion, and it doesn't matter whether it's children's fiction, women's fiction, anything, is small towns. And I love that TV, the drama, the way the characters all converse. Like I'm a massive Gilmore Girls fan as well. And I love that. So, and I love all Maeve Binchy's books. She's a big inspiration, although I think she's passed away now. And I could read her book in one sitting, and all the characters are just amazing. So yeah, her.
Okay, so now, which Hogwarts house are you?
Oh my goodness. Slytherin.
Slytherin.
Bad one.
That's why you like Jessica. She'd definitely be a Slytherin.
I think I identify with more the naughtier side, because I was very quiet and reserved growing up, and my nickname was Mouse when I was younger, and obviously was a reader and then something just shot me when I went to high school, and I just lost the plot for a bit. So yeah, and then definite free spirit. So I can identify with the children that are probably a little bit out there more.
I think when you're quiet and reserved, people misjudge you. And just because you don't walk into a room and like shout the room down doesn't mean that you're not fun or interesting. And I think the one thing I find about being a bit shy and reserved at times is that people sometimes miss out on the best of me because of that, because it takes a little bit more to get to know me sometimes. That I'm like, I'm heaps of fun once I'm relaxed and you get to know me.
I think that goes for anyone though, isn't it? You know?
Okay, last question. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back to the beginning of your writing journey?
Oh, it would be probably just to take your time. As I said, I just feel like I was in such a hurry, such a rush from the beginning. Although, as I said, it took me like a year longer than that to write the first kind of YA. Just that impatience that I had to push that self-published middle grade / junior fiction book out. And I just feel like, you know, take the time to do things right, properly, to a standard that you're happy with. But then that's all come with, you know, experience and age and whatnot. But definitely that's what I'd tell myself from the beginning. Just take your time.
Now, if people want to find your books, they can go to your website. That's is it thehybridauthor.com.au or just hybridauthor.com.au?
Yeah, the website's just hybridauthor.com.au, and the podcast there, the books are there, and all of me is there.
And for any traditional publishers that may be interested in reading your manuscripts, I know that's not how that works, though. It's not. No one ever emails and says, "I'd love to read your manuscripts."
Well, if it happens, we don't know about it. But yes, of course, I welcome all traditional publishers to touch base and offer me a fantastic, life-changing deal for my children's fiction. Yeah, they can email me there, joanne@hybridauthor.com.au.
And do you accept pitches for guests on The Hybrid Author?
I do. So the podcast in the beginning was me reaching out to people that I wanted to interview initially and ask questions. And now I'm pitched a lot by mainly booking agents and people like that. But I've had a lot more authors reach out to me this year. And yeah, I kind of do batching every 3 months, like 3 days with back-to-back kind of episodes. But yes, I take pitches direct. So happy to take anybody who wants to pitch me. I like to, if you, obviously tips are listen to the podcast first and see that I am a topic-based podcast, mainly obviously around writing, publishing. That all links back to the author's books as well at the same time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I've enjoyed our chat, and I will let you go back inside to your family now.
No, I'd rather just stay and talk to you, Kai. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been absolutely wonderful.
No problem. Thank you, Jo.
Bye.
Totally Lit is an independent podcast. You can help support us to continue to chat with wonderful Australian creatives by leaving a review on iTunes or sharing our socials with your friends. You can also make a contribution at www.buymeacoffee.com/totallylit. This will also help with equipment and podcasting platform fees. I love to interact with our listeners, so feel free to say hello either by email or social media. My email is totallylitpodcast@gmail.com. You can also join my group on Facebook called Totally Lit Writing Community. It's a space to continue the conversation and share your writing successes, events, launches, and latest projects. Jump into the group and say hello. Thank you for listening to Totally Lit, and don't forget to go out into the world to read, write, create, ignite.